You sit down to study, you spend hours with your notes open, highlighting, rereading, watching explanations, and in that moment, it feels productive. It feels like you're learning. But later, and when you try to recall the material without looking, it's gone. Not completely gone, but blurry, fragile, hard to explain. So you start questioning yourself. Maybe your focus is the problem. Maybe your memory is weak. Maybe you're just not good at studying. But most of the time, that's not true. The real issue is simpler. You are using study methods that feel productive, but don't actually strengthen memory, because real learning doesn't happen when information looks familiar. It happens when your brain struggles to retrieve, connect, and apply it. And that struggle often feels like confusion, slowness, or even failure. But it isn't failure. It's the signal that learning is actually happening. If studying feels easy, there's a high chance you're doing it wrong. You probably won't remember it. So in this video, we're going to talk about study methods work far better. Not tricks, not motivation, just approaches that align with how memory actually works. Let's start with one of the most powerful methods. 1. Active recall. Most people study by rereading until things feel familiar. But familiar doesn't mean you understand. It just means your brain recognizes the information. Active recall flips that. Instead of looking at the material again, you close it and force your brain to pull the information out on its own. That effort feels uncomfortable. Sometimes you go blank. Sometimes you feel like you learned nothing. But that struggle is exactly what strengthens memory. Like when you finish watching a lesson and feel like you totally get it, but the moment someone asks you to explain it, your mind freezes. That's not a memory problem. That's recognition pretending to be understanding. And here's the important part. That blank moment isn't failure. It's the workout. Your brain only builds strong recall when retrieval feels effortful. Most people quit right there because it feels discouraging. But that discomfort is literally the signal that learning is happening. 2. Spaced repetition. A lot of people study in long, exhausting sessions then never revisit the material again. The problem is, forgetting isn't a mistake. It's how the brain is designed to work. Spaced repetition uses that instead of fighting it. You review information right before it disappears, not after it's completely gone. It's like when you learn something today, still remember it tomorrow, feel it getting fuzzy next week, and almost gone a month later. That fading isn't weakness. It's the brain asking, is this important enough to keep? Each well-timed review answers yes, and every time you reinforce it, the memory lasts exponentially longer. So studying feels lighter, but retention becomes deeper. The mistake most people make is waiting until they forget everything. At that point, you're not reviewing anymore, you're relearning from scratch. 3. Interleaving. Studying one topic repeatedly feels smooth. You feel confident, you feel productive, but smooth learning can be deceptive. Interleaving means mixing different topics or problem types in one session, forcing your brain to constantly choose the right approach. That makes learning feel slower and more confusing at first. Like when practice problems feel easy in isolation, but the moment an exam mixes them together, you suddenly don't know which method to use. That confusion isn't because you didn't study, it's because your brain learned patterns, not decision-making. Interleaving trains discrimination. It teaches your brain not just how to solve, but when to use each strategy. And that's what real performance depends on. So the slight confusion you feel isn't a setback, it's your brain building flexibility instead of comfort. 4. Feynman technique. If you can't explain something simply, there's a high chance you don't fully understand it yet. The Feynman technique exposes that gap immediately. You take what you learned and try to explain it in the simplest possible language, as if you're teaching someone with zero background. It's like when you feel confident about a topic in your head, but the moment you start explaining it out loud, your sentences fall apart halfway through. Not because you forgot, but because your understanding was never fully clear. That moment of stumbling is incredibly valuable. It shows you exactly where the fog is, and once you see the gap, studying becomes targeted instead of repetitive. Most people skip this step and stay trapped in passive understanding, but explanation forces clarity, and clarity creates retention. 5. Blurting method. This method feels messy, chaotic, and honestly a little uncomfortable. You study briefly, close everything, and write down everything you remember without worrying about structure. Then you compare it with the material and see what's missing. That's like when you feel confident you understood a chapter, but the moment you try to write it from memory, huge gaps suddenly appear. That's not discouraging, that's diagnostic. Blurting turns invisible weaknesses into visible ones. Instead of guessing what you don't know, you see it instantly. And that awareness is what makes future studying dramatically more efficient. People often quit because their notes look disorganized, but the chaos isn't the problem, it's the mechanism. Messy recall is still powerful recall. The truth is, effective study methods rarely feel comfortable. More blank moments, more confusion, less of that fake, I feel productive satisfaction. But comfort builds familiarity. Discomfort builds memory. So if studying suddenly feels harder after switching methods, that doesn't mean you're doing worse. It usually means you finally started learning for real. If this shifted your perspective even a little, please subscribe. And if something resonated, leave a like. And tell me which method you'll try first. I'd genuinely love to know.